The moment my daughter stared me dead in the eyes on Christmas Eve and said, "You didn't pay Mom. You don't deserve even leftovers." Something inside me cracked in a way I didn't even know was possible. And I'm not talking about some bratty teenage attitude or a moment of anger she'd regret later. No, she meant it. She said it slow, cold, and with this twisted sense of pride, like she'd finally proven something. I remember standing there with my coat still on, snow melting off my boots, holding the gifts I had stayed up late wrapping, and thinking, how did things get this bad between us? How did my own child start treating me like an unwanted intruder? And here's the thing I need to ask you right away. Because honestly, I still don't know if I handled what came next the right way. Tell me if you think I was wrong for what I eventually did, or if any parent in my situation would have snapped the same way. I'm genuinely asking because part of me still lies awake wondering if I should have just walked away that night. But to explain why that moment hurt so deeply, I have to take you back to where all of this really began. My daughter, Emily, wasn't always like this. She wasn't born cold or entitled or cruel. She was my sunshine baby. The kid who would run into my arms every time I came home from work. The kid who made me handmade birthday cards even when she was 13 and too old for that. The kid who used to tell everyone, "My mom is my best friend." I held onto those memories like they were pieces of my heart. And for a long time, they were the reason I kept fighting through every hardship life threw at us. Because trust me, there were plenty. See, I was a single mom from the moment Emily was 6. Her father walked out one morning like he was heading to the grocery store. No yelling, no fight, no dramatic moment. He literally said, "I need some air," grabbed his keys, and never came back. Months later, I got a short text message, "I can't do this anymore." Nothing else, not a penny of child support, not a birthday call, just gone. And suddenly, I was a mom, a provider, a protector, a full-time worker, and a full-time emotional support system all wrapped into one exhausted body running on caffeine and love. We struggled. God knows we struggled. There were nights I pretended I wasn't hungry because we only had enough for one plate of food. There were winters when the heater barely worked, and I layered Emily in sweaters and covered her with blankets so she wouldn't feel the cold creeping through the walls, but she never complained. She always hugged me and said, "It's okay, Mom. We're together. That's what matters." But as she got older, something shifted. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in these tiny moments that, looking back, were seeds of something bigger. It started when she was around 16. She got a part-time job at a cafe and for the first time had her own money. I was proud of her. I thought it would teach her independence, responsibility. Instead, it introduced her to people who whispered poison in her ear. One girl she worked with used to brag constantly about how her mom funded her lifestyle: fake nails, hair extensions, expensive birthdays, spa trips, branded clothes. Emily started comparing everything. Every time I told her, "Sweetheart, I can't afford that right now," I could see her face crumble a little more. Then she'd say something like, "Other moms do it. Why can't you?" And each time she said it, I felt like someone was twisting a knife in my chest. I kept telling myself it was normal teenage stuff, that she'd grow out of it. But then she turned 18, got accepted into college, and everything accelerated. Suddenly, I wasn't her best friend anymore. I wasn't the mom she admired. I was the obstacle. The person who couldn't give her the life she believed she deserved. And it wasn't because she was spoiled. I never spoiled her. It was because she surrounded herself with people who judged worth by money. I felt her slipping slowly, like sand between my fingers. And no matter how tightly I tried to hold on, she kept pulling away. The first real fracture between us happened during her freshman year when she came home for Thanksgiving. I had spent hours cooking, her favorite dishes, her favorite dessert, the whole thing. And when she walked in with her new friends, the first thing she said wasn't, "Hi, Mom," or "I missed you." It was, "It smells like cheap butter in here." One of her friends even giggled, and Emily didn't say a word to defend me. I laughed it off at the moment, but when I lay down that night, I cried like a child, not because of the comment, but because I didn't recognize the girl who made it. Still, even with everything, I kept trying. I kept giving. I paid her tuition with loans. I worked extra hours. I skipped doctor's appointments because I couldn't afford co-pays. I gave her my car because she needed it for campus. I walked to work in the cold for 3 months. I did everything because that's what moms do, right? We sacrifice. We give until we're empty. And I never asked her for anything in return. Not gratitude, not help, just respect, just love. But somewhere along the line, She convinced herself that every sacrifice I made was simply my job, that I owed her everything and she owed me nothing. Now, fast forward to last year, December. Emily was 22 by then. She'd been living with her boyfriend's family while she finished school. I didn't mind. His family was well off, generous, and they liked her. Honestly, I was relieved she had financial support I couldn't provide. But what I didn't realize was how much their world was changing her. They had money, real money. Big house, multiple holidays a year, lavish dinners, designer stockings hung above their perfect fireplace. And slowly, piece by piece, Emily started treating that life like it was her birthright. Earlier that month, she called me and said, "Mom, Christmas is going to be at Dylan's parents' house this year. They always host. It's formal, so don't dress cheap." That's what she said. Don't dress cheap. I stared at the phone for a good minute thinking, did my daughter really say that to me? But instead of snapping, I just said, "Okay, sweetheart, I'll be there." Because despite everything, despite the distance, despite the attitude, I wanted to spend Christmas with her. I should have known something was off when I arrived. The house was decorated like something out of a magazine. White lights perfectly straight, gold ornaments, a 12-foot tree, the whole 9 yards. Everyone inside looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. When I walked in, holding a plate of homemade cookies, because I didn't want to show up empty-handed, I saw Emily across the room laughing with Dylan's mother. I waved. She looked at me, and instead of walking over, she just turned away, like I was some awkward stranger, like I didn't belong there. I swallowed the hurt and made my way to the dining room where the table was, well, extravagant isn't even the word. It was set for maybe 15 people, and at the farthest corner I saw a tiny card with "Guest" written on it. Not my name, just Guest. I tried not to read into it. I sat quietly, waiting for Emily to join me. She didn't. Dinner started without her ever acknowledging me. People chatted about investments and ski trips and new cars. I sat there, smiling politely, feeling smaller and smaller. When dessert came out, this massive multi-layered cake, everyone lined up to grab a slice. I stood up, but before I could take a step, Emily walked over, looked directly at my hands, and said, "Mum, you didn't pay into the dinner fund. Guests who didn't contribute wait until everyone else has eaten." I swear I thought I misheard her. I asked her to repeat herself, and she said it even slower, even colder. "You didn't pay, Mom. You don't deserve even leftovers." And that is where my heart cracked. But here's the thing. You need to understand the months, the years leading up to that moment to grasp why her words hit harder than any physical blow. Because this wasn't about food. This wasn't about money. This was about my daughter looking me in the face and declaring I didn't matter, that I wasn't worthy, that I was beneath the people around her. And the worst part? She said it like it was a fact. Like I should have known better. I walked out that night. Left the gifts I brought under their perfect tree. Left the cookies on the counter. Left without even putting on my gloves. It was snowing, and I remember the cold biting into my skin as I got into the bus. Not even an Uber, because I didn't want to spend the extra money. But the real cold was inside my chest, and I didn't know whether to cry or scream or collapse. I had no idea where I went wrong, no idea how I raised someone who could say something so cruel and not flinch. For days after that, she didn't call, not to apologize, not to check if I got home safe, not to ask why I left, nothing. But then something happened, something big, that forced everything to unravel all at once. And before I tell you what that was, I want to pause here for a second and ask you, what would Lao you have done at that moment? Standing there in a room full of strangers? Being told by your own child that you didn't deserve food at Christmas because you didn't pay into the fund. Would you have confronted her right there? Walked out like I did? Or done something completely different? Because trust me, what happened next changed everything. I wish I could tell you that after Christmas Eve, things settled down, or that Emily reached out with some kind of explanation or apology. But that didn't happen. In fact, the silence that followed was louder than anything she had said that night. I went back to my tiny apartment, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the wall for so long that the room blurred. It felt like I had lost her. Not physically, not officially, but emotionally, like the girl I raised had vanished into thin air and left behind a stranger who carried her face. For days I carried that grief around my chest like a weight, something heavy enough to slow my heartbeat and steal the urge to even get out of bed. I kept replaying her words over and over again, imagining different outcomes, imagining myself saying something stronger, imagining running after her, imagining grabbing her shoulders and begging her to remember who I was. But every version of the memory ended the same way. She looked at me like I was nothing. Like I was embarrassing. Like I was small. And the worst part was that somewhere deep in her heart, she believed she was right. It wasn't until a week after Christmas that I heard from her again, but not in the way you'd expect. I got a call from an unknown number while I was on my lunch break, sitting alone at a tiny table at work. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Emily's mother?" In this shaky, breathless tone that immediately made my stomach drop, it turned out to be a nurse from the hospital in the same city where Emily lived. She told me that Emily had collapsed at work, completely out of nowhere. Paramedics had brought her in unconscious. And just like that, everything inside me froze. All the hurt, all the resentment, all the anger, it all vanished in a split second. She was still my baby. She was still the child I carried inside me for 9 months, the little girl whose hand I held crossing the street, the teenager whose tears I wiped after her first heartbreak. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat, ran out of work, and got on the first bus I could find. I didn't care how far the journey was. I didn't care about the weather. I didn't care that I left my purse behind in my locker. A mother doesn't think in moments like that. She moves, she rushes, she breathes only for her child. When I reached the hospital, I practically sprinted through the halls, terrified I was already too late. When I finally found her room, I saw her lying in the bed, pale, an oxygen line under her nose, her hair a little messy, and for the first time in years, she didn't look like a stranger living a life that wasn't meant for her. She looked like my Emily again. Vulnerable, small, human. The nurse warned me that she was still groggy, still coming out of whatever was happening to her. I sat beside her bed and held her hand, and I swear, the moment my fingers wrapped around hers, I felt something inside me crack open again. But this time, not from pain, from love. That unconditional love you can never really bury no matter how deep the wounds go. When her eyes opened, she looked confused at first. Then she saw me, and I expected her to pull her hand away, maybe even ask what I was doing there, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "Mom," in this fragile voice I hadn't heard in years, and I swear it almost made me cry right there on the spot. For a moment, I thought maybe this was the turning point, maybe the universe was giving us a chance to fix things. But Emily woke up with more than confusion. She woke up with consequences. The doctor explained that she had been pushing herself beyond her limits, barely eating, barely sleeping, juggling school, work, bills, expectations, appearances. And suddenly everything made sense. She had buried herself in this lifestyle so deeply that she was drowning without even realizing it. Trying to keep up with Dylan's world, with his family's standards, with the illusion of wealth and perfection that she never actually had, she was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And for the first time, I saw the pressure she had been hiding behind all that coldness. She started talking, slowly, piece by piece. She admitted that she felt inferior around Dylan's family, especially his mother, who constantly hinted that Emily didn't come from much. She told me about comments made at dinners, about side eye glances when she didn't order something expensive enough at restaurants, about how she'd lie awake at night wondering if she was enough. Not just for them, but for herself. And then she said something that shattered me in a different way. "I thought if I could fit in with them, if I could be like them, you wouldn't have to feel guilty anymore. I thought, the more successful I looked, the less I'd remind you of what we didn't have growing up." It took me a few seconds to even process that. My daughter hadn't been pushing me away because she hated me. She was pushing me away because she hated the reflection of herself she thought she saw when she looked at me. To her, I was the reminder of the poor life we came from, the struggles, the sacrifices, the reality she wanted to escape. She didn't say it directly, but I could feel it in everything she said. She thought that treating me like I didn't belong would make her belong somewhere else. And when she finally got to the part about Christmas Eve, she broke down. She cried so hard she could barely breathe between her words. I was embarrassed. She sobbed. I saw the look on Dylan's mom's face when you walked in with the cookies. I saw the way she nudged his aunt. I knew they were judging you, and instead of defending you, I let them shape how I treated you. I thought if I acted like them, if I followed their rules, I'd be accepted. And I lost myself. I lost you. I'm not gonna lie. Hearing her say that hurt in a way I can't explain. Because even though she was apologizing, even though she was crying, the truth behind her words was heavy. She saw me as the flaw, the embarrassment, the part of her life she wanted to erase so she could appear more polished. It felt like being blamed for my own poverty all over again. And yet, at the same time, I saw my daughter again, the real her. The scared, insecure, overwhelmed young woman trying to fit into a world built out of glass and money. A world that cut her every time she touched it. I stayed with her through the night. We talked for hours. Really talked, not the surface, level small talk we'd been hiding behind for years. I told her everything I had been holding in. How much it hurt to watch her drift away. How heartbreaking it was to see her treat me like I was disposable. How lonely it felt to be her mother, and yet feel like a stranger. And I told her something else. Something I think she needed to hear more than anything. You don't owe the world a perfect version of yourself. You just owe yourself honesty. And I will always love you, even when you lose your way. But here's the twist, the part that changed everything, not just emotionally but practically. The hospital bill. Emily didn't have insurance. Her part-time job didn't offer it, and she'd canceled her student plan thinking it was too expensive. The bill was huge, massive. And you know who they expected to pay? Dylan's family? No, her boyfriend, no. They actually asked Emily what her plan was, and she looked at me with panic in her eyes. Mom, I don't have it. And that's when the second wave of reality hit me, all the people she tried to impress, all the wealthy family members she tried to mimic, all the friends she tried to keep up with, none of them were there, not a single one. No one rushed to the hospital. No one asked about her. No one tried to help. They liked her when she played their game, when she dressed like them, when she stayed quiet and pretty and agreeable. But the moment she collapsed, she became inconvenient. I paid the down payment on her bill. And before anyone judges me, I know what you're thinking. After everything she said to you, after everything she did, why would you pay? Simple. Because she's my daughter. Because even when she forgets who she is, I remember. Because motherhood doesn't turn off when your child hurts you. And because I couldn't stand the idea of her drowning in debt or being turned away for care she desperately needed. But I'll be honest, while I paid it, something inside me changed. Not love, not loyalty, but tolerance. The part of me that accepted being walked on, that part died. When Emily was discharged, she asked if she could come stay with me for a while because she didn't want to go back to Dylan's house. She found out, while she was in the hospital, that he went to a party the night she collapsed and didn't even bother to check his phone. He showed up the next morning with some half-hearted apology about not hearing it ring. But by then the damage was done. Emily realized she had been building her identity around people who didn't care about her. Not really. I let her stay with me, but I laid down boundaries. Real ones. Hard ones. I told her she needed to contribute around the house. Not financially but emotionally. I told her she needed to treat me with respect, not shame. I told her she needed to rebuild trust one day at a time. And she did, slowly. Painfully. Some days she'd slip, and I'd see that old attitude come back. Other days she'd sit with me at the table and ask about my day like she genuinely cared. We had dinners together, watched movies like we used to, took walks, talked, laughed, cried. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. But it was progress. And then came the final confrontation. The one I didn't expect, but the one that closed this chapter for good. Dylan's mother came to my apartment. I guess Emily had blocked her number or wasn't responding to her messages, so she felt entitled to show up on my doorstep. She started lecturing Emily, saying things like, "You embarrassed us on Christmas," and, "If you want to be part of our world, you need to act accordingly." And that right there, that sentence, was the spark that lit everything up. Emily finally broke. She looked her dead in the eye and said, "Your world almost killed me." She told her everything. The pressure, the insults, the judgment, the mental exhaustion, the collapse at work, the hospital, the bill, everything she had been holding inside. Dylan's mother looked stunned, offended, outraged, and then she had the nerve to turn to me and say, "Well, if you had raised her better?" And that was it. I stepped forward, looked her right in the face, and said, "If I had raised her better? No, I raised her to be strong. I raised her to survive. I raised her to be kind. I raised her alone. I paid for her education, I fed her, I clothed her, I carried her through every struggle while you judged from a mansion. You don't get to rewrite her life because it doesn't fit your perfect image." She tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. And let me be completely clear. If you ever speak to my daughter again with anything less than respect, you will not be welcome near her. Ever. Dylan's mother left without another word. And the moment that door closed, Emily burst into tears. She hugged me tighter than she had in years, shaking so hard I could feel every ounce of emotion she'd been holding in. Since that day, things have changed, not magically, not instantly, but slowly, steadily, honestly. Emily is in therapy now, learning to rebuild her identity without the need for validation from people who measure worth with price tags. She left Dellen. She started working part-time at a community center and told me it's the first job she's had where she feels appreciated for who she is, not how she dresses. And she apologized, really apologized, for Christmas Eve. Not with excuses, not with tears meant to gain sympathy, but with accountability. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have my daughter back. So here's my final question for you. Was I wrong for drawing the line the way I did? Was I wrong for confronting Dylan's mother and refusing to let my daughter be treated like she was disposable? Tell me honestly what you think, because this whole journey has been complicated and painful and healing all at once. And if you were on my side through any of this, please like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you all in the next one.